Hey there, Film Buds. Welcome back to the Film Buds podcast. I'm your host, Paul.
And I'm Lauren.
And for those who didn't know, it's Easter time-ish.
Close enough.
It's coming up. I mean, we've been invited to an Easter celebration this weekend.
Yes.
And so it's Easter time, and this whole April,
In this whole April.
we're dealing with April holidays. And so we started that trend last week with April Fool's Day, and, you know, when we were looking at all of the holidays and available things to sort of center the month around, one of the things that, you know, did come up was Easter, and we had originally thought about doing an entire theme that sort of focused on horror, because we're also halfway to Halloween. And so with Easter being this month, we decided that we would combine those ideas and do 2 weeks of religious horror, which was actually largely sort of your idea.
Well, yeah, because we broke down the month into basically like 4 holidays that like kind of sort of fell close to enough for Government Works Friday, which would be, you know, when we were putting these out. So, you know, April Fool's Day was perfect because April Fool's Day was Friday. You know, right there. Boom, we started there. And like, even though there's no holiday on the 8th of April, Palm Sunday is on the 10th. And so it's close enough for government work.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got Earth Day, which is Friday.
Yeah.
The 22nd. And then Arbor Day, which is the 29th, which is also a Friday. So other than like this week, they pretty much lined up like smack dab perfect for us doing like holiday themed April movies and shows.
Because next week for our second part of religious horror, we're going to be doing Midnight Mass.
Yes, because we'll be closer to, I forgot about Easter. We're going to be closer to Easter, which is like that Sunday.
Yeah.
Totally skipped over actual Easter.
But to kick things off, we decided that we would go with 2 religious horror movies, both of them from the 80s, both of them directed by, you know, what are now considered horror icons.
Yes.
First up, we have Wes Craven's Deadly Blessing from 1981. And then we have, from John Carpenter himself, the curmudgeon, 1987's Prince of Darkness. So that's sort of the 2 movies that we decided to pick. I don't think we really honestly intended to make them both 80s, or even necessarily. It's that thing again where like some of the joint theme of the episode kind of was a happy accident. You know how like we did Elia Kazan double feature by accident?
Oh yeah. Well, this one really happened because we had been looking through horror movies, and like these 2 popped up, and like they stuck out because they were 2 directort that, you know, we recognized from other things that we liked. So it was kind of like this, I mean, might as well do like a double feature of them. And then it just kind of like fell that they both landed almost in the exact same place in time as well.
Yeah. Before we jump into them, what are your opinions or experiences with religious horror?
Not a lot, I guess is my statement. I've seen The Exorcist. I watched that in 11th grade English at the end of the year. Where we were just kind of like done with testing, and we watched The Exorcist.
Perfectly fine use of time.
No, yeah. That was honestly like one of my random aside. This was actually one of my first horror movies ever, was in a really long time because I was a very scaredy kid, and so The Exorcist, I was like, oh, this isn't that bad, and then I started to like watch more things, but I was also in a safe environment because I was in school, so I was like, they're not gonna show anything that's gonna be bad, in theory, but Children of the Corn is about like a religious thing, right?
On a certain level, I guess.
I don't know. I've heard of it. I've seen clips of it, but I've never actually seen the whole movie. Like, it's really miss for, I couldn't name you another religious horror movie other than, like, I don't know, Omen, but I've also never seen that.
Rosemary's Baby.
Never seen it.
The Nun.
Nope.
I
This
think
is a
there's
fun
one
game.
called, like, Priest.
No,
maybe,
yeah.
with, like, Anthony Hopkins.
It's just not like one, I guess, that I've personally been like, I'm gonna dive down this rabbit hole, because also, like, I'm not very religious myself, so, like, I don't know, keep it out of the home.
No, I mean, I totally get where you're coming from. The BFI, the British Film Institute, has a 10 great religious horror films list.
Perfect.
We've got The Devils.
I've never heard of this movie.
All right. The Exorcist.
Yes.
The Omen.
Oh, perfect. I'm doing a great job.
Carrie.
Oh, okay. Then Carrie. I will add Carrie.
The Exorcist 3.
Oh, well, I've never seen The Exorcist 3. I've never seen anyone past the first
The
one.
Prophecy.
Oh, no.
Stigmata.
I thought that was Madonna for a second in that photo.
I'm thinking that that's Patricia Arquette.
Oh, interesting. It was where the mouse had been positioned that I was like, oh, that's definitely.
Oh, they put Constantine on here. I love that movie.
Perfect.
I'd call that a little bit of like a horror action movie. It sort of lives in the same world as like Hellboy.
Okay. Is Hellboy? Can I add Hellboy?
No.
It's not a horror movie.
It's gothic, I'd say, more than horror.
Yeah, but that's a lot of
Del Toro.
yeah, that's a lot of gear.
And I guess gothic is a type of horror, but like that's not really present in. There are a few horror-ish elements in some of the Hellboy movies, like the Tooth Fairy scene.
Well, yeah, but like overall, it's not supposed to be a horror movie. People aren't supposed to be like horrifyingly dying.
Red State.
No, definitely never heard of that.
The Sacrament.
This is great. I think that's the last one.
Oh, this is the one directed by Ty West, who also did X.
Oh, great movie.
Yeah. Religious elements again.
That's fair. Okay, I'll add that one.
Yeah, there is a certain religious type of text to X, now that we bring that up.
Yeah, okay. So there we go. That's my maybe 5.
Okay. No, honestly, I wouldn't say that it's one that I particularly consume a lot of either. I've seen some of the I guess shoddier ones, like Priest with Anthony Hopkins wasn't really that good.
I like how you whispered it.
I've seen, I think The Nun. I think I've seen The Nun. So some of those I've seen. Oh, there's like a whole religious thing happening kind of on a certain level with, not deeply, but with, the second Conjuring movie.
Okay.
But no, it's not one that I've really consumed myself, because again, like you, like, I'm not really religious, so I don't really go seeking even horror movies.
Yeah, like, it's just, I don't know. I'm fine with just, like, not, having it around really at all. Just casually, not like a malicious thing or anything. It's just like, I don't need it.
No, for sure. The reason that I knew of Deadly Blessing, for a little bit of backstory, is I went to UNCG and I took a horror class. I've talked about it a lot here. And on top of that, I also had a screenwriting class, several screenwriting classes, actually, and a production course with a guy named Matt Barr. And Professor Barr was great. He's a very distinct personality. And I really enjoyed my screenwriting classes with him. Well, it turned out that he had directed, or not directed, written a screenplay for a 80s horror film called Deadly Blessing. And so it had recently gotten a re-release from Shout Factory, because apparently before that it was like very hard to find. It was only on VHS because the movie didn't do that well. And so it wasn't until this re-release that it was easily accessible. And so we decided to watch it in class and do like a whole sit-down discussion with Barr about writing it, the horror themes of it, and so forth. And it was a great time, and I really enjoyed the movie. And so when we were talking about religious horror, since I own the Shout Factory re-release, I was like, oh, also this is an easy win.
Perfect. Got to pull something off of the shelf.
Yeah. And then on top of that, after I finished college, I went out to LA for a little while. And Professor Barr was nice enough to put me in contact with a guy named Glenn Benest, who was his co-writer on Deadly Blessing. And so for a little while, I also worked with Glenn in these workshops, where we would workshop script ideas and that sort of thing. It was a great time, and I really enjoyed working with Glenn. And we hadn't spoken in a while, but since I knew both of them, I also decided to reach out to them. And I'm still trying to get Barr involved, but I was able to get Glenn Benest involved.
Woo!
And so instead of a clip, what I'm actually going to do is give y'all the first part of my interview with Glenn, and then we'll talk about Deadly Blessing. So give it a listen. You graduated from UCLA in 75. You got your MFA there, is that correct?
Yes, MFA in playwriting.
Okay. And that was also where you met Matt Barr, your fellow co-writer. Just to sort of get into the swing of things, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit more about yourself and about some of your background?
Sure. Well, I was an English major in college. I always wanted to really not be a screenwriter. I wanted to be a playwright. So that's why I got my degree in playwriting at UCLA, my MFA. And I knew really nothing. I'd read all these great plays, but I was never involved in theater, really actually putting on a play or acting in a play or directing a play. So I wanted to actually get hands-on experience. And it was a really good program. It was a 2-year program. The only thing is I realized at the end of it that I couldn't make a living as a playwright. There's only a handful of people who actually, make their livings that way. So I didn't want to be a professor and do it on the side or do it as a hobby. I wanted to make a living as a writer. So I thought, well, I'm in Los Angeles, so I should try screenwriting because you can actually make some pretty good money as a screenwriter. And that's what I did when I got out of the program. I met Matthew Barr. He was getting his bachelor's in film. So I thought, well, he would be good to write with because he knows more about film than I do. So that's what we did. We thought, okay, well, what should we write? And I thought, well, horror would be good. I always loved horror movies. But also, it's for a beginning writer, you can get your first credit in horror a lot easier than you can in other things. Because in horror, you don't really need a famous writer. You don't need a famous cast. You just need a really good script and that's scary, and they can do them on fairly low budgets. So we thought, okay, let's do horror. And I had read an article, and I think it was National Geo, about the Amish people. And that they live like in the Middle Ages, they don't use electricity, and it's a very medieval kind of worship, and they're disconnected from the modern world and all that. And they have this, they believe in spirits and demons and things like that. So I thought, well, this is interesting. This would be a good world to set a horror movie, So that's where it started.
Okay.
Let's do a horror movie set among the Amish.
No, I think that's great. So I guess out of a little bit of curiosity, when you were planning on being a playwright primarily, were you interested in telling more sort of horror-centric plays, or?
Well, yeah, I mean, I did write a play with a writing partner named Will Sims. We wrote a play called Demons, which was based on the last days in the life of Edgar Allan Poe. So, my interests were always kind of with dark subjects. I liked that. I liked the Gothic. I liked Edgar Allan Poe. I liked, those kinds of subjects. So I think it kind of made sense to do horror. Plus the fact, when I was growing up, those books like by Stephen King and Carrie and Poltergeist and those kind of movies. I mean, I really related to those kind of movies. So I just thought, well, I'm interested in that kind of material, and it made sense, in terms of the kinds of stuff that I like, but it also made sense, like I said, in terms of what would be a good script to begin with. What's most commercial, and people always love horror, so, and you don't need a big budget. So, and the possibilities of for a producer or production company of making a really good profit is very high with horror, because you've already got an audience that that goes to horror movies. It doesn't matter what it is, they just want to go to horror movies. And you've got the possibility of sequels. So for both aesthetic and for commercial reasons, it made sense to me. I mean, I was just sort of shooting in the dark. I didn't know much about the film industry, but I sort of figured that part out.
No, absolutely. Well, and we'll you mentioned something interesting about horror, but I guess I'll bring that back around in just a second. So you guys decided to go and sit down and write this screenplay. How long did it take y'all to sort of write the first few drafts of it before it ended up also getting picked up?
Oh, it didn't take that long to write a couple drafts, because at that time I'm young and I was very enthusiastic, and I would just write. I was just pumping stuff out. So I'd say it probably took about 6 months to write a couple drafts, but that was just the beginning, because the way that we got it to the producer, Max Keller was the head of this company called Intergalactic Productions. And he was just a beginning producer. He had done a couple of things, nothing big, but he was a lawyer and he had a production company. And I met his secretary at a party, and I was talking to her, and she asked me what I did. I said, I'm, beginning screenwriter. And she said, oh, my boss might be interested. And I said, oh, it's a horror movie. And she goes, oh yeah, I think he'd really like that. So he read the script and he really loved the concept, of it, the whole thing with the Hittites, the Amish, and the horror and all that. So, and he also realized, it could be done on a very realistic budget. You didn't need $10 million to do it. I mean, at that time, 10 million was a lot of money. So we could do it with a minimal budget. And so I got hooked up with him, and he wasn't great with giving notes, but he tried to bring in different directors and people to give notes on how to make it better. And at the same time, he had bought this book by Lois Duncan called Summer of Fear. And he needed a writer to, translate that into a screenplay to sell it as a TV movie. So he hired me to write the screenplay of that based on Deadly Blessing and the script. And the network amazingly accepted me as the writer because I was an unknown, but they agreed to that. And he got Wes Craven to direct it. So that's how we met Wes Craven. And the TV movie did really well. And at that time, Wes Craven was kind of an unknown too. He had never, this was before Scream, this is before Nightmare on Elm Street, all those big horror movies that came later. He had just directed a little independent horror movie called Last House on the Left, which was a hit in the independent circuit. But anyway, he directed, ended up being called A Stranger in Our House, and it did really well in the ratings. So we got him to agree to direct Deadly Blessing, and he was, he knew horror way better than any of us did. So he gave us notes, and then he actually did a pass of his own on the script. So that's how we got the script to be a lot better. We did rewrites. And it was also getting a director attached, which was, once you have a director and you have a good script, you're pretty close to getting it produced if, company likes it, because getting a director is one of the biggest, the hardest things to do. So we had that, and he was, getting a reputation as a great horror director. And so there was a company that was just being formed. They had gotten a bunch of money. They had never produced anything, but they wanted to produce quickly 5 movies. And one of the movies they wanted to do was a horror movie. So we submitted it to them. They greenlit the movie. They liked the script. They really liked Wes Craven. And that's how it got made, which was that was after, I'd say at least 3 years after we first attached Max Keller as the producer. It took us about 3 years to do the rewrites, to get Wes on board, to find the right production company that was willing to do it. And it just all came together. A lot of getting movies made is a lot of luck, and the stars have to be in alignment. Everything kind of comes together. And in this particular instance, everything came together. And we had a budget of $3 million, which at that time was, pretty low budget. But the great thing too about Deadly Blessing was it was all set in this one little town, this one little Amish town where these people were. So it's not like it was easy to produce. You didn't have to go here, go there. You had this one little area. You had a farm, you had a barn, you had, you had very minimal locations. So that was also in our favor, that you could, make it for $3 million. And we had a pretty decent crew. We had a really good crew, but we also had, a great cast. We had Sharon Stone. It was like her second movie. I think she had done a Woody Allen movie, just as a bit player. Nobody knew who Sharon Stone was, but, she's very pretty, and she didn't really know. She was a model, I think, but everyone thought, oh, she's very photogenic, and, and she didn't play the star role, but she was one of the girlfriends. And, after that, she became a huge star. So, we had a pretty decent cast.
No, yeah, I mean Sharon Stone, Ernest Borgnine. It was definitely a great little
Yeah.
cast.
Oh, there was Lois Nettleton,
Mhm.
who was a pretty well-known stage actress, and she had done a lot of, character stuff. So yeah, we had a lot of, good actors. Um, and that's all you really need in horror. I mean, you don't need a big star. Some of the best horror movies I can think of didn't have big stars, you know.
No, absolutely.
So you just need a really good premise, good actors, and a really, something you hadn't seen before. And nobody had seen this kind of Amish horror movie thing, The only other Amish movie I can think of at that time was Witness, but that wasn't horror. But it was about the Amish people. And I think people were very intrigued by the idea that there's this kind of cultish group living, in a modern world, but they're not modern at all. They live according to these principles, from hundreds of years ago.
Yeah.
So people were intrigued by that.
No, I mean, it's, looking back at, I've really gotten more and more into horror over the years. And, looking at when Deadly Blessing comes out, 81, you're kind of right there around the time of the slasher really taking off in the horror genre. And so, Texas Chainsaw came out 74, Halloween came out 78. I think Halloween 2 is 81 as well. And I think that Deadly Blessing kind of taps into that nice storytelling that the slasher provides, which is get people to a location, and then just sort of build up the tension and build up that atmosphere sort of around them. And so I think that it fits nicely into sort of what was happening, especially with the horror genre at that time.
Mhm.
And so I definitely understand why it was appealing then, and I understand why it's still appealing now, because it also has, the isolation aspect of it, as you were talking about, which works both in terms of the production value, but also in terms of the storytelling to build some of that sense of dread as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of beginning writers don't understand how important this is. That you can make a movie, that you write a movie that can be done on a modest budget. And that becomes so appealing to producers, whether it's comedy, whether it's horror, whether it's even, a drama, that you don't need a big budget. You don't need a big star. And beginning screenwriters don't seem to take that into account, that the less locations, the better, because, the hardest part in a movie is lighting. Every time you move from one room to the next, you have to relight it. So the less you have to move a crew around and light everything, the less time it's going to take. So the less locations, the less actors, the better. We don't want to move around a million times. People think it's a movie, so it has to be so visual, so we have to have 100 locations, but that's not true. No, we want as few locations as possible, as few actors as possible. Here's a great example is A Quiet Place.
Yeah.
It was one of the best horror movies, I'd say, in the last, 5-10 years. That had like basically 1 or 2 locations, and a very limited cast. And the star was also the director from The Office. But he's not a big, huge movie star, people know him, people like him, but, he's not Tom Cruise, So that to me was the perfect horror movie.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, because it fits all of those horror things that you want. And it had the one great concept that no other horror movie I've ever seen does, which is that the monster they couldn't see, but they had an incredible sense of hearing. And I'd never seen that before, So that was a great concept, It was a scary monster as can be, but its hearing was important, not its sight, not anything else. So that made it unique. And, it was just very cheap to make. And look how much money that movie has made,
Yeah.
So from a producer, you got to think from the producer's point of view. What does a producer want? They don't want huge budgets because then they have to get big stars, and it's hard to get a big star. So you want to, think, from a commercial point of view.
Yeah, no, I think that that's honestly a really good piece of advice. It can be so easy to sort of get a little bit caught up, a little bit runaway with what the concept is. But you look at some of the first films of a lot of different first-time screenwriters or directors or what have you, and they're all pretty minimal productions. Clerks is all inside of the convenience store.
Yeah.
Halloween, it's a few places in LA. It's the school, those few street corners and 2 houses. I had a third example, and
Friday the 13th was another one.
Put them all out at the campgrounds,
Yeah.
So
you get a deserted, summer camp. That's it. That's all we need,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And it also, I think, definitely helps focus in on your storytelling abilities also, because now multiple characters have to track in some way emotionally through that whole period. You don't just have this barrage of this revolving door of characters. You have to stick with certain characters throughout the story. So I think it's also a good point just in terms of really learning character and that sort of thing.
Exactly.
The Coens, that's what I was going to say. Blood Simple.
Blood Simple. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, very simple. Very simple. But you need a good story. You need a good villain, because in horror, the villain a lot of times is the star, like in Alien, it was the villain that was just like, oh, wow. I mean, it was incredible. I've never seen a villain like that before. Scary as can be. So yeah, or like A Quiet Place, that was a very unique villain. And, a protagonist who you can root for.
Yeah.
One thing that I noticed in horror, because I do webinars and, I do a lot of consulting, a lot of beginning writers, I help guide them through their scripts. And one thing I noticed about horror, which is different than any other genre, and that is that in a drama and comedy, in suspense and action, all these things, characters need some kind of a character arc. They need to start one place and end somewhere else. And that's what makes a great protagonist. They're not the same at the end as they were in the beginning, right? Lethal Weapon is a great example of that. Mel Gibson. He wants to kill himself at the beginning of the movie. By the end, he's joining the family and society. He doesn't want to kill himself anymore. That's his character arc. And that's a great character arc. And great movies, have great character arcs. But in horror, you don't necessarily need that. I mean, sometimes you'll have a character arc in a movie, like Scream has, the main character has a character arc. But I can cite you many horror movies where you just have a very likable protagonist who is in danger of being killed, and their whole journey is to protect themselves and protect their loved ones. And that's it. They don't change. They're not different at the end than they were in the beginning. they they always had they always had guts. They always had survival instinct. They were strong characters. They weren't weak characters. But they didn't change it from emotionally, from going from one extreme to the other, like you see in, like I said, like in Lethal Weapon or one of those movies. So audiences love character arcs, but in horror, it's not really necessary. And so, that's just a unique aspect of horror.
No, for sure. Taking some of what we've talked about directly to Deadly Blessing, I think that that story does. I think that the movie does a really good job of doing a little bit of a fake out. For so long, that movie really does point you toward the idea that whatever is terrorizing her is very directly tied to Ernest Borgnine and the Hittite followers and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And in so many movies, the sort of bald, mentally impaired, figure would probably have ended up being like the reveal that it was them as the killer, this person from the society that was a little bit of an outcast. And then, your movie does this sort of reversal on that, where he's one of the first major casualties of the movie. And I think that it does a really good job at subverting your expectations, but also regularly still leading you in one direction until suddenly the reveal comes at the end of who the real killers are. But it still works so well because then you go back and you watch it through a second time, and like any good mystery, all of the hints and all of the clues are kind of lined up throughout the story. So that was Glenn Benest, one of the writers, along with, of course, Matt Barr. The director, Wes Craven, also did a pass on the script. I think he wrote like a draft or two. And the premise is, after her husband dies under mysterious circumstances, a widow becomes increasingly paranoid of the neighboring religious community that may have diabolical plans for her.
I love that.
The cast includes Maren Jensen, Sharon Stone, Susan Buckner, Jeff East, Ernest Borgnine, Lisa Hartman, Lois Nettleton, and Wes Craven alum Michael Berryman, who played like one of the evildoers of The Hills Have Eyes, the original Wes Craven film.
Is that a religious film as well?
I don't know. I've actually never seen The Hills Have Eyes.
Oh man, I was really truly asking. I have no idea.
I want to say Cannibal Family.
Oh, okay. So it's more like Leatherface?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, with that said, that's kind of an overview, and of course you've heard me and Glenn talk about it some. Dear, what do you think of Deadly Blessing?
Oh, I think that this movie is great. I think it has I think it has like a great premise. I think that it's doing some weird stuff, honestly, but it kind of works with the whole mystery of it, who is truly causing the chaos and where is it coming from, and because you've got this young woman, our lead, who is being harassed by the neighboring Hittite community, and because her husband is the head honcho of the Hittites' son, who has been disowned, and he's now brought his city wife to the farm that he was given from I guess an extended family member, because I don't understand why they would be like, we got to kick you out, but also you can live next door.
Or maybe he got it before he met her.
Oh, maybe. Interesting. Anywho, but like they come back and it causes maximum harassment and haranguement from the Hittite people with just like, I think it's it's probably not entirely accurate representation of a people. I mean, I don't know. I've never experienced, I guess, any kind of this thing before in real life. I've never lived in like Amish country.
Well, and I think that's also why they kind of pivoted off of labeling them Amish.
Oh, true.
You know, they do technically call them Hittites.
Yeah. So it's just kind of like X group, because Hittites aren't real.
There was a religious group referred to as the Hittites, but they're not really around anymore.
Okay, so we can poke fun at them because they're not real anymore. Anywho, I'm sorry. Yeah, so that's pretty much like the whole premise, and it's like there's a wacky neighbor and her daughter who like have no boundaries as a family, I would say. And she brings her like girlfriends. Her girlfriends come to visit because her husband dies like in the first like 5 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, he's our first kill.
And they're like, you can't live here by yourself in this house. We're gonna keep you company for a week, and until we feel like your strength has come back and you can get some sense and get out of here, kind of, I guess. It's a really interesting premise. I think that, what's his name? Edward Borgnine?
Ernest.
I think that he does a phenomenal job. I think that he is exceptionally creepy, and he makes the best, like, mean old man face that around. Like, he's really, his face is sunk in that direction, and it's working for him. He does a great job. I think that he's like my standout of the cast. He just really does a phenomenal job. I think after that would probably be like Sharon Stone for me. I think that for some reason that character got like all of the moments, and it was like so strange because she was just like one of the friends. It was being like haunted in her sleep by some spirit. I think that this movie went in so many directions with like what it could be. Like, they try to Scooby-Doo us so many times in this thing where it's like, it's maybe a ghost, it's maybe the Hittites, it's maybe some third thing that we haven't discovered yet, because she straight up gets haunted by some weird spirit and like goes crazy, and everybody's like, but people are getting murdered, Susan. That's not her name, but
Lana Marcus.
It was something very Beverly Hills sounding.
So it's funny that you mention Sharon Stone having such a meaty part. Apparently, I was watching the movie with the director's commentary on, and apparently the producers were very hot on having Sharon Stone in it. Mm-hmm. The producers were also, this is just a side note, insistent on the girls, whenever they're like hanging out at the breakfast scene and stuff like that, being in that ridiculous like lingerie.
I was gonna ask about that. Mm-hmm. I'm so glad that you brought that up. I had honestly kind of forgotten about it, but like while we were watching the movie, I was like, I need to put a pin in this right here, because every single time, not one of them wore a bra. Never once. But it was also, it was nipple season all of the time, and I feel like
they were filming in winter.
Oh, were they really?
Yeah, they were filming in winter in Dallas.
Oh, that's fascinating. I still
Waxahachie.
I'm still gonna say that the producers had a little like nudge in that direction too, because they were like in their 20s and they were wearing like, I've been married for 20 years lingerie. Like it was so lacy and frilly, but it was like the step above, I think, like an actual teddy.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, it was like, oh, maybe she would be wearing this with her girlfriends, which is a lie. They would all be wearing oversized t-shirts and maybe some pajama pants that are too old.
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about?
Wes Craven, you can tell, was not overly fond of being pushed in that direction.
it's really weird. It was like they don't have any personality, so like let's amp up the hot. Except for Sharon Stone, who goes crazy. Everybody else is just like hi, I'm hot kind of personality. But like other than that, I think that it all works in the movie really well. And you also have to think about the fact that this movie was made in the 80s. You know, late 70s while they're writing this thing, and then being produced in the 80s. Like, it's not gonna be the most, like, jaw-dropping of, like, character work.
No, and Wes Craven, you know, it was still earlier in his career. This was the first movie, you know, that Glenn and Matt had ever written. Mm-hmm. But overall, like, I think it's I really enjoy the movie, because I think that, I think you're right. I think it does have a lot of really good atmosphere. And I think it does have some good, creepy moments. Mm-hmm. And you're right, Borgnine does do tremendous, but Borgnine is, like, easily the star hire of the movie.
Which is such an interesting choice, because usually they'll go with, like, the star of the main cast. You know, one of our heroes has to be, one of our survivors has to be our star, where in this case it's definitely like our main antagonist is like where the money went for this. And it works so well. I think that like he carries a lot of this movie for me, that I can like, and not saying that anybody was bad, I'm just saying that like they were also all kind of flat, except for the characters that, like, obviously were more interesting to write about. Mm. You know? Which were the Hittites and our main Papa Hittite and the crazy neighbors. Like, it's like it's a group of normal people being surrounded by, like, weird, and, like, that's the movie.
Yeah.
Well, it's like I guess on a structural level. But no, like I think that it works. It's great. It was a great ride. I thought that it was very successfully creepy. Mm-hmm. It's got a lot of good, like, it could be anybody energy, which is fun.
No, it does have that mystery element, like I talk about a little bit with Glenn in the interview. Mm-hmm. Which I think, you know, there are multiple slashers that, since like slashers and thrillers share so much DNA, mm-hmm. there are a lot of horror movies and slashers that call on that whodunit vibe, you know, to go and make it this sort of compelling mystery that also runs along the horror film, like with April Fool's Day.
No, yeah, and like also the fact that this kind of runs down Wes's career a little bit as well, because like later down the line he does the Scream franchise, which is also a whodunit. You know, you have a murder, and in that case it's more of you know exactly that there is a person. This is the thing. Somebody is out here stabbing people in a ghost, you know, costume. Whereas in this, we never get to see anything, and so it really is. It's the same kind of basis, but like
No, we only ever see the killer one time, and they're in like a cloak.
Yeah, exactly. And is it Lana's imagination? You know. Mm. Is it all a part of her weird spider sex dreams that she's been having with the haunting going on in the attic? Is that where her bedroom is?
No. It was in her nightmare she was in a regular room. It just had like an exposed rafter.
Okay. It just felt like everybody else's bedrooms were like super close together, and hers was like on the other side of the house in the creepy area. But also
just write it off to dream stuff.
You know, that's fine. No, yeah. I think that it's a nice, tight, good horror movie with some, like, fun things that we haven't seen before. And I'm not saying, I guess, that I would get in, like, the habit of being like, let's watch more religious things, because religious horror, I guess, specifically. But like, I think that when it's something personal to the people who are creating it, it's done the most interestingly. You know? So I think that this was really interesting. Like, I'm sure that that's why, like, The Exorcist is a good movie, you know. Midnight Mass, as we'll talk about later, is like very religious themed, you know.
Well, and you know, you talk about it needing to be, you know, personal to you. I think, you know, Glenn was very interested by the Amish people. Wes Craven had lived near an Amish community and also grew up in a very strict Baptist home. And so I think that, you know, he definitely can sort of relate to, and I think that that's also probably why the film really excels there, is because, you know, you've got the written film, but then you also have what's interesting to a director, you know, to your point. And I think that he was definitely very interested in what makes the film, you know, unique, which is that it is kind of like this religious slasher of a kind.
Yeah. And I think that that's, like, an intriguing thing to get at. Because, like, I'm also, I guess, saying that, like, not everybody can write every type of content out there. Like, there has to be a limit because of our different perspectives and experiences that have molded us into the people that we are. But I think that, like, it's always interesting, especially in the realm of horror, to what your movie is about is at a bare bones, especially like a first movie, is at a bare bones like an extension of kind of like you.
Yeah.
And I think that works really well here, you know, with their personal involvement and experience with the subject matter. But also, you know, that's why other horror movies that have like lasted so long work so well, is because it's self-expression. This is why Jordan Peele's stuff works so well. You know, he has a very like distinct perspective and an interesting one, and that's why, like, you gotta, I don't know, I guess,
write what you know.
Yeah, write what you know. That's that's literally the longest way around to getting to that point right there. That's why we have shorthand.
No, I think that that's all totally fair. You know, I think it's definitely not necessarily a perfect movie. Wes Craven talks about, in the commentary, if you ever listen to it, he talks about, you know, seeing places where he'd do something differently, you know, or change something this way. But overall, I think it's a really, really enjoyable film, and I enjoy going back to it every so often, because it's a fun, easy, you know, sort of movie.
No, yeah, and like Glenn said earlier, it's also like just like fun themes about like repression and like basically like this powder keg about to explode of like of repression of sorts. With
Very still relevant today.
Oh yeah, completely. And like how without the right places to go and the right people to talk to, it can be harmful, you know. Like there's a moment in the movie where the brother of the dead husband, who is the Hittite son,
John.
number 2, yes, John, is like trying to figure out, I guess, his place in like society, and trying to like personally go through the like, what if I do want to leave the house and the family and like have this be my life, and like starts flirting with one of the friends that comes to visit, but he's like betrothed to like a second cousin or something of the family, and so he's like really in this like middle ground of figuring out like what he wants to do. And like there's this scene that's almost like mirrored, I would say, of like cause and effect. Basically, it's like the scene where he like throws himself at his like his betrothed cousin, who is a whole part right there. But he like throws himself at her, and she is not about it, and like runs back home and gets him basically like kicked out of the family. Sounds like a mob story. But then he goes to like the girl that he likes, City Girl, and she's totally here for it. And so it's like this weird, interesting kind of like what can and can happen, but then like, I guess I don't want to give too much away, but like it's like a climactic moment in both aspects,
No, for sure.
It's weird. It's an interesting dynamic movie as well. It pokes at a lot of threads that are really fun.
Mm-hmm. That guy, by the way, played Huckleberry Finn in the 1970s film.
well, damn.
And he's best known as young Clark Kent from the 1978 Christopher Reeves super movie.
Oh, that's perfect. That's what I want my filmography to look like. I want to have things that people go, yeah, when they hear it.
Good old Jeff East.
Is that his real name?
Yeah.
Ah, gosh. Sketch with him and Adam West. Anywho.
But no, so I think that that's all really fair. And horror so often taps into those ideas of, the return of the repressed. That's what Carpenter was kind of wanting to go for with Halloween. And so I think that it plays, especially, it automatically amplifies that theme the moment that you put it into any kind of strict, codified, religious context.
Oh, yeah, that's why Carrie works so well. It's rebellion from the way.
Yeah.
And it's such an interesting thing because I feel it's so relatable. We've all been there with something.
Yeah. And so I think that again is definitely, to your point, the thing that also does really work well for it and makes some of it so interesting. So if you had to give Deadly Blessing a score out of 5, what would you give it?
I think I'm going to give Deadly Blessing a 4.
Okay.
I really enjoy it. I could tweak some choices for sure. But for the most part, like, I think that it's a really solid, like, well done movie, honestly. Is this the one where, like, at the end?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. My brain keeps forgetting about that because it's so shocking. But I'll never tell. But yeah, no, I think I'm gonna stick with a 4. I think that it's other than the very, very end of the movie. I think that this movie is like a slam dunk the funk.
No, that's fair. I'll go 3.5.
Okay. That's fair.
Now that we've gotten past the score, to inform the listeners, one, we're about to do another part of the interview with Glenn, and that has spoilers aplenty.
Yeah, it does.
And two, I also wanted to talk about that ending that Lauren referenced. So the movie has only vaguely touched at this idea that it's a supernatural element at play. And really it seems more like a hysteria kind of like heightened by the religious terror of the area. And at the very end of the movie, the producers decided that like they needed a spicier ending. And so they decide to have the main character survive the whole movie, send her friend away, go back inside, close the door, where she's then visited by the ghost of her murdered husband, who gives her a ghostly warning, and then she gets consumed by a dragon demon that bursts out of the floorboards and drags her to hell.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly what happens, and it comes out of literal nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I had forgotten because we watched both of these in the same day, and like we've watched a lot of horror movies, and like sometimes the mind just likes to play tricks on you. And for this one, that ending, I was like trying to like play pin the tail on the donkey with this ending in the movies that we've watched recently, going, no, that's not right. Is it here? Oh gosh, no, that doesn't feel right either. And that's why I had to ask you, because I was like, wait, is it this one?
Mm-hmm.
It's so
the extra thumb of an ending.
It's so strange. Oh my goodness. It's such a choice. The more I think about it, the funnier it gets. Mm-hmm. Honestly.
Because it just ruins the whole tone.
Yeah, because it's like
nice, serene, peaceful moment. She's survived.
I think that they were trying to get like one of those moments where it's like the evil never stops kind of thing. Like even though the killer has been caught at this point and she can finally live at peace, that like it's kind of like Scream. Like anybody can be the next terror to her. And like, what if it is, you know, Papa Joe Hittite or whatever.
Yeah, but then she gets literally consumed into hell.
Yeah, but I think that was what they were trying to do. But they were like, let's jack it up to 11.
Ruin the whole damn movie.
Oh God, they were so afraid. They were like, what if it's terrible?
What if it's boring at the end?
You know?
We need to give him one last scare.
It wasn't even scary, was the thing.
We need to give him one last scare.
It literally just made me go, why?
Yeah. No, I think it's a pretty insane choice, and I certainly don't get it.
I do have to talk very briefly about the poster for this movie that has, I don't know what I was expecting from the advertisement to what the movie actually was, but I think that the art on the re-release is like a way better picture of like what movie you're actually getting, because on this it could have been a vampire movie for all I knew, because it's the scene from the dream, but it's also like they've done something with her hair. They've made it darker. She looks like some undead beauty or something, and like these hands,
those could be vampire hands.
Exactly, and it's called Deadly Blessing. Like, it could have been a play on being a like a vampire.
Undead, yeah. Deadly Blessing.
Exactly. So I really had no idea. And it's really sexy. And I think that's strange, but also not unlike this movie for some. It's because of all the lingerie. But just such a choice. You know, I had truly no idea what this movie was about from the poster for it.
No, I mean, it definitely, I would say, gives a vampire feeling.
Yeah, all the way. Her hair is black, and in the entire movie, Sharon Stone is a blonde.
No, they solidly do, I think, try to make it look more like it's Maren Jensen, our main character, more than Sharon Stone.
It's like they were like, oh God, people know that Sharon's going to be in this? Maybe we should have made her the lead? I don't know.
No. I think that is probably fair. It's also based on what I know about the producers, based on
that little blip.
What we've heard that they intended on adding, and the fact that they wanted Sharon Stone so badly. I think it's pretty safe to say that they wanted to sell sex appeal and Sharon Stone.
Yeah.
To sell the movie.
Absolutely craziness. Anywho.
Yeah. Moving on, we're going to now play the second part of the interview with Glenn, and then we're actually going to go ahead and jump into our discussion of the next film, Prince of Darkness. So, once again, here's Glenn.
It's great to have, a mystery. Who's doing this? I think that reminds me of Scream, where in Scream, that actually was a student of mine, Kevin Williamson, was in a writing group that I was that I had, I had really good writers in this writers group. You know, as well as being a professional screenwriter, I always, you know, would teach workshops, and I would have writing groups. And I had an amazing writing group that Melissa Rosenberg was in. She ended up becoming a huge screenwriter of the Twilight movies, and she was one of the producers and executive producers on Dexter, and I mean, she became huge. And the other one was Kevin Williamson, who wrote Scream and all those kind of movies. He was in that group. So anyway, we worked on Scream, and I thought one of the things about Scream that was so interesting that instead of having one killer, you had two. You know, it was these two guys who were doing this, and I thought that's different. That's a bit of a twist. So, you know, it's really great to have some kind of a twist. You know, I keep asking people that are writing horror, you know, what's different about this than any other horror movie? And you need something different, just like in A Quiet Place, like in Scream, Nightmare on Elm Street. You know, this guy exists in your dreams and your nightmares. You know, I mean, you need that because, like I say, we've seen so many horror movies, and the horror, you know, audience is just huge, probably bigger than ever today. And they'll go to see anything, but they want something different. They don't want to see the same old slasher movie. You know, they want to see something that they haven't seen before. So, you know, you're always looking for that. And like I said, we found out with Deadly Blessing just because of the group, you know, the Amish Hittite people, which had, you know, people knew very little. Today, we know a lot about them, but at that point, no, people didn't know. That's when I read the National Geo article about them, and I went, wow, can you imagine these people live like this? And they're, you know, and they actually do quite well. They're really good farmers. They, you know, but they will not accept anybody that questions them in the group. They'll throw them out, just like Mormons will, or any cult does. You know, when you question them, they shut down, and they'll throw you out. So that raises the stakes of being in that group and doing something that's not absolutely in the tradition of the Amish. And if you've lived there your whole life, that can be a death sentence. I mean, that's all you know. So to be thrown out into the modern world, I mean, would be scary as can be, right?
Yeah. And you know, the horror genre is also so much about, you know, transgressive topics, that taking this ultra sort of repressive group and putting them into a horror genre, a horror film, does open up a lot of opportunities to play with how that sort of rigid structure and how that sort of mindset, and also how familially, you know, sort of connected it is, can end up becoming something that's horrific, you know. And so I think that works really well in the film.
Yeah, that's another part of horror. Like I said, at one point I did a webinar on horror, and I reread and, you know, saw a bunch of horror movies just to say, okay, what is it specific about horror, right? And one of the things, not only do you not need a protagonist that has a character arc, but another thing about it, which is unique, is that the more you repress something, the more violently it comes out when it does, right? When you can't hold it down anymore. So when you have a very repressive group or family, you know, who keeps pushing it down, not allowing it to be said or to be explored or anything like that, when it does emerge, it comes out in really horrific, violent ways. So that worked perfectly for the Hittites because they're so repressive. You know, sex and all that. I mean, they can't deal with any of that, you know?
Yeah.
And they can't deal with the modern world. So when it does and or our the girl who ends up becoming the real killer and her mother, I mean, she's being repressed because she's actually not a girl. So she's being repressed in such a incredibly, violent way, such a repressive way, that when it does emerge, it comes out in, these horrific ways. So repressing something violently that's a good theme for horror.
No, absolutely. And you were talking about a likable protagonist, a likable character, and whether or not that they need to have an arc. I think that the lead of Deadly Blessing, Martha, definitely she's got likability. And I think that that's also established just by putting her in a state of tragedy early on. The audience wants to sympathize with her, I think, and empathize with her because her husband passes away. And so you sort of real quickly build this empathy and sympathy for her very quickly in the movie.
But yeah, they're both pretty, I mean, that was the key, is making them both sympathetic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of it was just Lois Nettleton is a very sympathetic actress, so that helped a lot. So the real villains are very sympathetic. Who you think are the villains are not sympathetic, and and that fools the audience.
Do you have any? I guess you've already given, honestly, a lot of free advice and wisdom. Do you have any sort of last pieces of advice or last thoughts that you?
The last thing I have to say about all this, is you're only as good as the feedback you're getting. Okay, so when I was a beginning writer, I'd ask my girlfriend to read my script, or just a friend who knew nothing about film or nothing about what makes a great screenplay, and I would get feedback that was a lot of times just terrible, and I would do a draft and it would made the script even worse. So you really need to work with somebody, and I was lucky to meet Wes Craven, and he gave me great feedback because he knew what he was doing. He was in the business and he had done horror, and he knew what made a great horror movie. So everybody needs a Wes Craven. You need somebody who knows screenplays, who knows how to critique them, who knows exactly how to get to the core of what's not working, and then help you to brainstorm and coming up with better solutions. And you don't go to another beginning screenwriter to get notes on your screenplay. That's ridiculous. If you were trying to be a great pianist, would you work with a great mentor teacher who had already done concerts and knew everything about playing the piano, or would you go to another beginning pianist? No, you'd go to somebody who knows what they're doing and can give you great advice, great feedback. You're only as good as the feedback you're getting. And everybody needs great feedback. Nobody gets it right on the first go round. Nobody. I don't care how talented they are. You need great feedback. So go to professionals who know how to professionally critique what you're doing and help you to write a better script. Don't give it, I have a group on Facebook. It's called the Secrets of Screenwriting Group. And I always get these posts from beginning screenwriters saying, who can read my script and give me notes? And I'm going like, why would you do that? Why would you ask another beginning screenwriter to give you notes on your screenplay? That's asking for trouble. Go to somebody who's trained to do that. And it takes a lot of knowledge. It takes a lot of work to get to the point where you can, really zero in on exactly what the problems are and then help the person to, fix those problems. That doesn't come from just graduating from NYU Film School. That comes from a lot of work. So I'm just, amazed that beginning writers want other beginning writers to help them with their scripts. I mean, that's absurd. No athlete athletes go to professional coaches who have worked in that sport for many years. And they know exactly how to in tennis, they know exactly how to help, somebody like Rafa become a great tennis player. They don't go to other beginning tennis players to become their coach. So you just have to be very careful who you're asking advice and notes from, because you need great feedback.
No, I think that's another really well said point. It is one thing to have learned, in school certain skills. It's another thing to have practical experience about, the transitionary period of the first draft to the moment that it's filmed, and edited, to help you look at what's going on in the mechanics of the script itself. So I think that that's a really, really fair point. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on.
Well, it was a lot of fun. It was nice going back to those golden days of Deadly Blessing.
So that was Glenn. We hope that you enjoyed having him on. It was a great time talking with him. Honestly, it had been, like I said, a long time. It had been like 6 years since I had talked to Glenn. So it was nice to see him again. He looks well. And we definitely thank him for coming on.
Yes.
And being so gracious and generous with his time. Moving on, we're now going to Prince of Darkness, which came out in 1987. It is written and directed by John Carpenter. A group of graduate students and scientists uncover an ancient canister in an abandoned church, but when they open the container, they inadvertently unleash a strange liquid and an evil force on all humanity. And it stars Donald Pleasance, Lisa Blount, Jameson Parker, Victor Wong, Dennis Dunn, and most importantly, Alice Cooper.
Wait, what was his name?
Street Schizo.
Perfect.
Who I saw in concert with Nick Delgadillo.
Absolutely wonderful. He just plays like a bum on the street.
Yeah. So, dear, since again they've heard me and Glenn talk for a while, why don't you take us away on Prince of Darkness?
Okay. Prince of Darkness is... It's like, for me, what if we took, like, Indiana Jones and put Satan in it? You know what I mean? Like, they bring... So, also, I love the fact that the thing blatantly lies about them opening it. It just kind of does that. Like, they don't actually get to open it. They talk about all the time how it's locked. And they can't figure out how to get it opened. It just starts to, like, become more powerful. And that's how it opens. But, anywho, this movie, for me, is very much... They bring a bunch of people who are the best of their fields, and like graduate students and all these smart people who study things like ancient, Sanskrit, and they bring them all to this place and don't tell anybody what's going on, and they're like,
a lot of them are also the students of like a moral philosophy professor.
Yeah,
is that what he is?
I don't even know. They all had like, and I'm the botanist,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's or like Atlantis, where they're like the best of their abilities, going to go and find Atlantis. But this time it is to try and figure out what is in this weird canister of ancient green ooze. and whether or not it's dangerous, basically, for a really long time, until it starts to like leak up onto the ceiling and everybody's like, maybe we should be more concerned about this. And it
He's
reminds
a quantum physicist.
This movie reminds me of a lot of different movies that have all kind of done these same tropes. Because I just keep thinking of more movies that have done this, like, let's bring all of these different people of different backgrounds together to solve a problem. But with all of that being said, I liked this version of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think that it is unique enough. I think that it is, because I've never seen anything like this. Like, they're in like an old library or something.
They're in the basement of a church.
Yes, that's been now kind of like, because of the spirit of Satan or whatever is in this ooze, is like powerful enough to sway people and things of little mind, basically. And so like all of the homeless people in the street end up being like a mindless zombie, and like
mob, yeah.
And all of like the the like bugs and things are like acting strangely and like trying to like covering the windows. Like there's one scene where there's a bunch of worms just like covering a window, and they're like, how odd, as they all just like continue to do their thingamadoo on like really old 80s computers. And slowly, one by one, they get picked off like an alien.
No, yeah, well, and that's exactly the sort of classic setup for slashers and also for mystery films that are like an Agatha Christie thing, you know?
Yeah.
You get everyone together that has the particular background that's sort of a cultural shorthand. Mm-hmm. For some type of person.
No, yeah, they were like the Power Rangers. There was the black one, and the red one, and the yellow one, and the blue one. Like, they all had their gift.
Yeah. Heart.
That's right. Oh, God,
so,
Captain Planet, I love that. Love you.
No, I think you're right. I think that it definitely uses that structure very distinctly. And Carpenter talks about how the fact that like the mob of like the homeless was definitely also a device to kind of like keep them trapped in the location.
Oh, yeah, no, it works really well. They, like, barricade them at one point, but then the next scene, I don't know if you noticed this, everything was gone.
Don't worry about that.
It was like, poof. It was all an illusion. Where it might have been the spawn of Satan being born or something. I don't know.
I think that everyone does a pretty good job for the most part. There are a lot of characters in it, you know, especially comparatively to like, you know, Halloween.
They're only distinct by basically the fact that we have a pretty diverse cast for the 80s. You know, and that helps a little bit. You're like, oh, you know, there's the white girl who's our free spirit girl, and then there's like, you know, I don't know,
the stuffy one.
Yeah, there's the Asian guy who's like kind of an asshole, you know.
You've got our leading man with the mustache.
Oh, it's terrible.
You've got our old guy.
Yes.
Not Donald Pleasance, and not Professor Barack. But the old white guy. That's like one of the other professors.
Oh yeah, that's just like around. Yeah.
You got the bald guy. Mm-hmm. And then you do have Donald Pleasance, and I think that John Carpenter, he talks about just wanting to have worked with Don Pleasance again. And I think that he just really enjoyed listening to Donald Pleasance's monologue.
Oh,
and so he definitely wrote like a very monologue-heavy part for Donald Pleasance.
And it's really funny how, and this is no knock at Donald Pleasance whatsoever, but for the most part, like his priest Priest, right? His name is just Priest. I didn't even know that they didn't even give him a name. Well, his performance as Priest and Donald and
Loomis
are almost like the same type of character. You know, they're very the one who's like, I know that something's coming. Evil is among us. You should all be wary. And everybody else is like, crazy crackpot old man.
I think this is the more timid version, sort of that character type. He's a little bit more of a mousy presence compared to Loomis, I think.
No, yeah, but I love the fact that he was like, I love him, put him right back where I had him before. Perfect fit, you know?
1-to-1.
Yeah, it's great. No, I think that you're right. I think that the performances they're good, you know? I think that there are definitely some standouts in this, but for the most part, like, I really enjoyed the ride. I really enjoyed trying to figure out what was happening, because they do that thing that horror movies do where they don't tell the characters a lot of information, and so you as the audience member are therefore confused for a good portion of the movie as well, until you finally figure out what's actually happening and somebody like gives you an exposition speech that tells you like all of the plot that you missed. I love the poster for this, by the way. It looks like a weird lava lamp man's face getting sucked away.
What I think Carpenter also does really well is in this particular movie as well, is it has great use of the location. I think that Carpenter overall is really good, actually, in his films overall, with having a lot of good, like, sort of geography awareness and use of the space. Because so much of Halloween really only takes, especially in the last part, only takes place in those two houses.
I agree.
And so I think that he does a good job of that here, and of also making the space feel good and claustrophobic. Also, this movie has some pretty gnarly, nasty gore, especially in the case of the woman who gets possessed by the liquid. She looks horrifying.
Oh, and I guess because oh, you mean the one who's like the impregnated one?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. She looks like death. Where the other one's just kind of okay. Okay, sorry, I have a whole thought to unpack right now. I thought it was interesting, other than like our main possessed woman who like ends up looking like Freddy Krueger on a bad day. I think that each of them, I kept watching them, and each of their individual choices of what this character, of what it was to be like possessed by a bit of Satan and basically be a dead person, you know, like zombified, mindless army. Just that only goal is to create more of self. Honestly, like a zombie. But then there was the black guy.
Who was doing something different. And I was intoxicated watching him. I was like, I want to know what's going on with you specifically so badly, because it was almost like watching like a sad clown, you know, where he would do this like immense laughter and then like basically like go to tears, and all of this emotion where everybody else was so still and so stagnant, and it was just really just fascinating to watch him. Especially, I thought that he was more interesting than our main girl who ends up getting like possessed. Well, not like our main girl, but like the possessed one. I thought that she was just fine in her possession. I felt like she was like, this makeup's gonna do all of the acting that I need right now. So like, yeah, and it did do it. But like, she was just kind of there for the ride. Whereas like he was, I want to know why. I really do. And maybe that's just like me as an actor, but like, it was so cool. Well, on a certain level, he also is the only one that does the like like self-harm.
Yeah.
So maybe on some level he was trying to fight it
Maybe.
more than the others.
Maybe. And because like he ends up singing when he's walking up the stairs at one point, and it's a church song. Mm-hmm. And it's oh gosh, yeah, it took me, the whole thing. I really wanted more of him.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I thought that he did a tremendous job. You are right. He is one of the more standout possessions of the film.
That one and the one that I'll call Beetlejuice. The one with the bugs. Yeah.
No, but overall, I think that you're really spot on with that. It is maybe a little bit slow at times for me. Mm-hmm. But once it really gets cooking, it gets cooking.
Yeah, I will completely agree with that. Gosh, what is this movie called?
Prince of Darkness.
Prince of Darkness. So we talked about this earlier at lunch, but I have a really hard time with the names of these movies.
Both of them.
And it's because I find them so just like, I guess, generically interchangeable almost at a certain point. Like, I could call the other one Prince of Darkness just as much as I could call this one Prince of Darkness. And I could call this one Deadly Blessing just as much as I could have called that one Deadly Blessing. So it's like for me, I'm just like, it's movie name torture, honestly. It's one of the harder combos for me. Because also, I guess for me, it wasn't very clear of what the science mumbo jumbo led to them discovering that, like, Satan was in another dimension. Like, which buttons were you guys pushing? You know, which science buttons were you pushing? Because it was just a bunch of gobbledygook at certain points in
I guess it was a mixture of, like, calculation and translation.
I mean, yeah.
I think it was like, I think that it was like spitting out a sequence of numbers.
This was such like a doomsday movie in the sense that like they could only get one of everybody, almost like the Ark or something where you're like, oh, we can only get just the minimum number of things in here. We can't have like a whole team of like people working on translating the book. We can't get a whole team of people who do advanced techno mathematics. We only get one of everybody. Like that's the worst way to do that. You've got an imminent threat coming in, and they're like, we can only find 10 of the smartest people in the world.
Well, it's because this also had to stay hush hush.
Ah, that's such a crutch in itself for a movie.
Yeah.
You could have actually, like, maybe solved your problems if you had enough people to solve your problems.
No.
It makes it seem like everybody in the world is just either these 5 smart people or the 10 homeless people outside, and that is it. Where is everybody else?
They're not necessary.
There's nobody else in that town. Nobody was walking down the street one day and going, those homeless people are doing some weird stuff. They've been stalking that one building for a while. They've barricaded it. Should we put this on the news?
Maybe they were in a bad part of town.
I mean, maybe. That's so unlucky for this church, I guess. I guess that's why I could have the spirit of Satan's maybe baby goo in a tube in the basement.
Yeah, you know, it's like a more quiet, abandoned part of town, because, like, that church had seen better days.
Well, yeah, but, like, also there are a lot of churches that you could say that about. I don't know where those tithes go.
Apparently that was a church in downtown LA.
Oh. That makes sense for also, like, it being something easy for them to do in LA.
And the basement was actually from, like, an abandoned hotel.
Oh, that makes way more sense, because it was huge down there.
And a lot of built-in production value.
That building was enormous. It really felt bigger on the inside than it did when you looked at it from the outside. Like it was expansive under there.
So
Cavernous.
if you had to give Prince of Darkness a score out of 5, what would you give it?
I think that I'll give Prince of Darkness. I think I'll give Prince of Darkness a 3.5. Yeah, and like again, I think that this movie is super fun. Like I would totally watch it again. I have a lot of questions. I think more so than I did about the other one. Like the other one was very like straightforward. This one like tried to wrap itself in like smart lingo, and I was like, what on earth are you guys saying? Do you know?
The actors don't.
No, and that was part of the problem. But honest, some standout performances all around. Nobody that I had really seen before, other than the people that I've seen before. But like most of the cast was like new faces. Yeah, I guess that's what Glenn talks about with the whole you don't need a star. You don't need a star. It can just be anybody because the horror fans will come to see some horror.
Yeah. No, I'll go 3.5 as well. I think that it's an interesting direction. I don't think that it necessarily nails everything that it goes for, but I do think that it does a lot right. I think it has a lot of great atmosphere. I think it's got a somewhat, sort of tragic ending that works really effectively. And it has that great sort of twist cut-off ending as well that I think works better here than it did in Deadly Blessing, because it also sort of leaves it off on a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really good. I not perfect, but very, very enjoyable.
Yeah. I mean, for me, this movie was like one step away from like having maybe a Busta Rhymes kung fu fight in it, and I think that might have helped it. No. Jokes aside, I loved them digging through the world's thickest wall to get homie out of the closet. I was like, he's right there, and they just kept adding thickness to that wall. I swear, they were like, crap, they got through the drywall too quick. It's actually brick. And that was the part but it's not just brick. It's like 3 layers of bricks thick. I'm not an architect, but I think that was plot.
I don't know what you mean. No, I think that the wall definitely was a little convenient, especially for people that were apparently talking through it.
Yeah, they were just chatting and like not like screaming through this wall. Like truly imagine being on 2 opposite sides of like a concrete wall.
Yeah.
Because like the rest of the room isn't concrete. It's just this one brick wall. Like it's just why? How is this even the same building?
But beyond that,
old construction.
I think that this was a good sort of first start for religious horror. It sort of tackles it in very different ways.
No, yes. Also, this one is way more like upfront, I think, with like what it's about, whereas like the other one could be like interpretation, what do you think it's about. I think that this one is like, no, it's like the spawn of Satan or something.
No, yeah, this one with Deadly Blessing, religion is a part of it, and it drives a lot of the suspense and atmosphere. But at the very end of that movie, it's not really the thing that's the villain.
No, yeah, whereas like this one is like it's a vampire
It
story,
is
but
man versus,
monster.
evil
yeah.
of a religious type.
Yeah, exactly. This isn't man versus man. This is man versus some supernatural force. And yeah.
And so this one definitely does tackle it way more directly. Well, I guess it's been kind of a lengthy episode because of the interview portions as well.
Yes. So,
do we just want to sort of do what we've been watching and then
yeah. And let's
let them go and enjoy the rest of their life in peace?
Oh yeah, I need to remember to close this notebook. The pages are very much starting to rip out of our dear movie notebook. Maybe I'll put the in a binder. I don't know. Maybe. But what we've been watching recently is so literally the only movie that we watched between the April Fool's Day episode and this episode was Death Becomes Her. Together.
Yes, for Bruce Willis. We watched that actually after we recorded last week's episode. That was our date night movie.
Yes.
What did you think of Death Becomes Her?
Oh, I thought it was a great movie. I thought it was super campy. But you know me, I love a campster piece. I thought that everybody did a phenomenal job.
Great Bruce Willis performance.
Yeah, really different than like what we usually see him do, which is very like action man Joe kind of thing. Where this one he was just like an everyday guy who kind of like, I don't know, stumbled upon some luck, but then just became miserable. And like he was just kind of like an accountant is how I would call his character. Like whatever your visual in your mind, you think of an accountant. Like that's what his character was.
Yeah, he's the one out of the three of them. They all kind of have a similar underlying problem, which is this internal dissatisfaction. And he's the only one that finally learns the lesson.
Yeah.
Out of the three of them. And he plays it with a lot of heart and a lot of charm, because it could be an unlikable character.
Yeah, he could be an asshole. He could be some scummy dude that you're like, I want the worst for you. But like he does, I think that you're right. He is likable enough that when he gets his happy ending, that like it's good, it's worth it. Even though like he did do wrong, like he's become a different person. He's metamorphosized, whereas like they didn't change.
Yeah.
I think that I don't get to see a lot of Michelle Pfeiffer's career. That's Michelle Pfeiffer, right? No, that was Goldie Hawn.
Yeah.
Oh, see? Damn it, I do this all of the time, where people who have, like, similar facial structure, where I just go, yeah, like, mental swap. I haven't seen a lot of Goldie Hawn's career, like, at all. And so it was nice to see. I've seen a lot of her daughter,
Kate
Hudson's career, because like she was in everything when we were growing up. It's felt like, but like Goldie, never got to see anything of her. It was really nice to watch something with her. Young Meryl Streep is fantastic in any age you can get her, but this was truly a funny character that I really enjoyed watching. And she's got a lot of physical comedy that's like perfect.
She's really funny. She's shockingly funny.
Yeah, you wouldn't know, because like I think we have this idea of who she is now, and we're like, oh, Meryl, like Oscar winning, best actor female Meryl. Whereas like she's I don't know how old she is in this, but like she's definitely much younger, and so like she's probably not as well known as she is now, less demigod worthy status in the acting community. But like I think that's also then why she can be so funny and so loose and so interesting in this, because she doesn't have to worry about being like also the woman who did Julie and Julia. You know what I mean?
The Iron Lady.
Exactly. No, I think that and like them as our three main cast is such a fun dynamic group of people. Really, really enjoyed this movie. Really good. Would recommend. Would watch again. You know.
It's one that I would pick up.
Yeah, for sure. It was a surprise one for me because I had never heard of this movie before we watched it, and when we had been discussing watching a Bruce Willis movie in honor of our dear Brucey, I had been thinking about like all the movies that I watched him in, and they're all kind of, you know, his action phase. But this was so fun when you recommended like a weird, campy dark comedy. Sign me the hell on up.
No, and I was curious about it because I hadn't seen it either. And I'm definitely glad that I did.
Yeah, for sure.
Beyond that, I've watched the 2014 Godzilla. Mm-hmm. Still great. I wrote a review about it on Letterboxd. The movie knows how to use and introduce scale and the size of these creatures well. Mm-hmm. And it knows how to also hold back on the goods in a way that builds, I think, good tension. Because you get plenty of beats with the Mutos throughout the movie, but it's like an almost hour into that movie before you finally see Zilla.
And I think that that's perfectly acceptable. I think that people are so afraid nowadays when
we gotta show Freddy
right now in the first 5 minutes, or else like we can't have a teaser, we can't have a taste. We got to give people like a never-ending loop-de-loop roller coaster. Mm-hmm. Like you don't get a moment to be like, all right, that was nice, oh, and then a hill. Like you're like, no, we're just in constant action.
Well, and honestly, then you kind of, I think, on a certain level, after a few movies, if you want to do more of them, run out of creative steam, because it's like, how many situations can I really put this character in? Mm-hmm. You know, how many times can I show Godzilla in a way that's interesting still?
But I think that to your point, that having him not show up for like the first hour of the movie is like
works great.
It's a great choice, because then, you know, you're not watching a Godzilla movie in the sense that like you're watching Godzilla, you know, do his day-to-day things. You're watching a Godzilla movie in the sense of it's exactly what it was supposed to be, which is a disaster film.
Yeah.
So you're watching it from the perspective of the people trying to stop the
Twister
disaster.
doesn't have one twister happening in it for the entire movie. Twister has multiple twisters.
And they come, and they go, and then there's plot between them.
Yeah. You know, definitely some of the human stuff, as has been discussed by so many people, doesn't work as well as I would like it to. But for the most part, I think it's great. Also, I recently rewatched the remake of 3:10 to Yuma.
Yes.
Hell of a Western. 2007, I would say, is kind of a year that reinvigorated the Western. Because you had, like, 3:10 to Yuma, There Will Be Blood, which is a kind of Western, and No Country for Old Men.
What year, now that you've
2007.
No, that wasn't my question. I was going to ask you, what year did Cowboys vs. Aliens come out?
After that, like 2009.
Okay.
2010, because it was after Iron Man 2.
Okay, because I was going to say that that's also within this renaissance of us getting a lot of Westerns, but like, God, that was such a weird Daniel Craig performance.
It was supposed to be a Robert Downey performance.
Oh.
Because it's directed by Jon Favreau, but he and Robert had a fallout over how Iron Man 2 was perceived.
Oh my gosh.
And so Robert backed out.
Wow.
It's a fun fact about that movie for you.
Now all I can think about is that movie, but with Robert Downey in it, and like how it changes it, and like, I don't know if it's better or not yet, but this is right after
I think he's going to end up doing more physical comedy with trying to get it off. I think it's going to become a bodier performance.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I was like, he would probably lean more into like that Sherlock feel of it, you know? Because like, Westerns aren't that far away from, like, that era, but in British history, you know.
No, he'd lean into what he did, which is why he did the part well, and why he still pulls out those tricks, the Chaplin stuff.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah.
But yeah, 3:10 to Yuma, fantastic movie. I really recommend it. It's got Alan Tudyk, America's best character actor.
These are the facts.
And no, it's a really solid, damn good Western. You know, that's why James Mangold did so well with Logan later on, is because he definitely just knows how to make a Western and what they're about thematically.
3:10 to Yuma sounds like it should be a Coen movie, because the Coens name their movies whatever the hell they feel like.
No, I know how you feel about Coen titles.
What's a Lebowski? If you didn't know, what is it?
No, that's fair.
I thought it was a heist movie. It's The Big Lebowski. I didn't know.
But that's pretty much all that we've been watching lately. We haven't even gotten caught up on Moon Knight this week.
Oh, no, but we can do that this weekend.
Yeah. That's pretty much all that we have for y'all. Be sure to come and we have a bonus episode coming out Saturday. So be sure to check back on podcast or on our website. For that, of course, check us out at thefilmbuds.com or at any of our social media. You can listen to a longer version of the interview with Glenn on his website. Once I have information on that, I'll keep y'all up to date on where you can go and listen to that. I'll also link all of Glenn's websites and stuff like that down below. On Monday, the 11th, there's also going to be a review for the straight-to-video film Wormwood Apocalypse. And you can go and you can read my review of that. Our review coming up on Saturday is going to be Everything Everywhere All at Once. The new A24 film from the director duo Daniels. Starring Michelle Yeoh and Jamie Lee Curtis. So definitely come back to hear how we feel about that. And I think that's pretty much everything.
Yeah.
Oh, also, of course, next week when we do Midnight Mass.
Yes, please come back. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, hell yeah.
I can't wait to jar on and on and on about that. So stay tuned.
No, it's going to be a great time. Dear, anything else that you want to say to listeners?
I'm sorry for anybody who was offended by how much I talked poorly, I guess, about religion. To each their own, but I am a sorries.
No, you know, religion is, you know, for a lot of people a very touchy subject, and we certainly don't mean any offense by anything that we said. And yeah, you know, to each their own. Religion is a very personal choice, and, you know, if that's your cup of tea, take a sip.
Yeah.
So...
Take a sip for me, I guess.
Yeah. Beyond that, though, that's pretty much all that we have for y'all. Religious horror is, of course, a very interesting theme to tackle, and it expresses itself very differently.
Yeah, it's just...
In next week's...
I mean, just from these two alone, honestly, yeah. I think all of the things that we've chosen are very different flavors.
Yeah, because also, you know, in both instances, also, you know, religious figures do ultimately, in some way, play a part in the saving of the day.
Oh. Interesting. More on that at 11.
So not without merit.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks as always for listening. Be sure to check out everything that we have coming up. Be sure to check out everything that we've already done. And we'll chat with y'all next week. Bye.